Hello and welcome to another Do Not Draft video from thefanpub.com. I've got Sean with me.
It's going to be an interesting list. We're targeting here, aren't we, top players that we just simply will not be pulling the trigger on in any draft if we can help it. We have to put a proviso in, don't we? Obviously, there comes a value if they drop far enough down that's worth considering, but for the main part where they're standing in their ADP ranks, we won't be touching them.
Yeah, it's not that we're saying they're bust. We're actually saying we don't think they'll return their value at their ADP. We don't like where they're going in drafts.
And to help our sort of more inexperienced users, the kind of thing that we tend to look at to help you, because you'll often hear people debating things, is round 1 target is worth about, you want 200 fantasy points or more, round 2, 180, round 3, 160, round 4, 140, and so on, till you reach about round 6, where anything that's going to get you 100 plus points is a good pick, if that makes sense. So you're looking at those kind of players that have that upside. And that can help you when you're looking at any draft format. So that's what we're really looking at here. Can they return their value? Or do we just want to avoid completely because we're absolutely not convinced? So this is our list.
They're all in the top 77 picks. So
10 players from that list. That's 10% of the
10
list.
10 players for you to avoid and do not draft.
You may disagree, and that's good, and we want to hear your feedback. And we've got some players, and it might shock you.
And let's go from the backwards. The first player on our list is ADP 77. It's Robert Woods.
Yeah. I've talked a lot about him extensively previously. And I think it's wise that I start off. Last year is a bit of an anomaly, actually. It's kind of that classic outward season for Robert Woods. He's had some fantasy value in the past, but it's very hit and miss. Last year was a lot more consistent, and many people would question why would we put him on the list when he's had 8 touchdowns, these kind of yards. Why? Well, because the Rams have suddenly got very, very good. They've added more pieces. The defense has got better. I think Robert Woods starts to look like the odd man out now, and I think that's what's going to be found out here. And you're going to see his value, because I think that's an outlier for him. That's the highest you'll ever see him, and I think this year we're going to see a good sort of 20-30% reduction, yet you're paying a premium price for him, so I'm not happy with that.
If you just think of the weapons the Rams have got, you got Gurley in the running game. He's going to get some catches.
Yeah.
You got Brandon Cooks, who just given a massive 5-year contract to. You've got Cooper Kupp
coming into his own year too.
So he's at least 4th option on probably not.
And there's another point that Al raises, which I think is excellent, because he says he's going to be the 4th option and maybe worse. And there's another point as well, is if Rams, which they have, is a very hard running schedule, that's not necessarily a bad thing when you have a 3-down back, because what they do is you get them out into space and you put the ball in their hands, because that's what you do with your playmaker. So that even means limited more work for Robert Woods as Gurley ramps up more catches. I could see Gurley getting a little bit more share over Robert Woods losing a share. So when you look at all the mouths that he's got to feed, I think he becomes the odd man out. That's why he's on the list.
Well, plus if you look at game scripts, the Rams are actually pretty good now. So they're going to be running the ball to see out games. They've got a good defence.
Yeah.
Relatively
not
good
a bad O-line. So it's it's their men against other men, and no matter how you lock that up, if you've got good game script, you can make it work for you.
So that's number 10, Robert Woods. Right, and number 9 is a rookie running back from New England, Sony Michel.
Yeah,
he's currently going at ADP 73. Why don't we like him? Sean?
Well, we've mentioned him a few times, so you're probably getting a pattern for him now. It's a crowded backfield. It's New England. He comes in with all the issues to overcome. He's had a bit of an injury. He's got to fight his way through several names to reach the field. There's so many things that can go wrong for him. Yes, he will get opportunities, I've no doubt, but to return that value, I'm not seeing it for this season.
It's a very crowded backfield. And
don't see it.
There's a lot of capable backs in it, and we've seen from New England before, if you fumble the ball, you're out of there. And he's done that a couple of times already, and he's missed 14, as we speak, he's missed 14 or 15 practices.
And that means you're so far behind the 8 ball. Can you trust him? I mean, even in early, if we look logically into the first 2 or 3 games of the next, the new season on the horizon, I can't see him getting much work early doors as they move the rust off him and try and get him into up to speed with the game scripts.
Well, with Belichick, he's going to have to earn his trust. So.
And Belichick will write game scripts to match up against anybody, the best in the business, I think, at doing it. And that might mean that they could be Sony Michel's game script, but I think the odds are going to be pretty slim early doors. We'll see how that plays out, but I'm not drafting at that ADP.
Okay.
And haven't.
Counting down to number 8, it's ADP of 69. It's Evan Engram, the tight end from New York Giants.
Yeah, I think I better kick this one off. Look, his price is massively inflated, and we've got to remember that New York last year lost pretty much everybody. Eli Manning had very little to throw to, so the tight end benefited. So well done to the rookie for benefiting. But this year, everybody's back. You've got more mouths to feed. I think you're going to see a massive decline into the pack of tight ends for him. I'm not saying the guy isn't talented, but that's a huge ADP.
I mean, there are times where they will create mismatches with him, and he'll have weeks as well.
Definitely, yeah.
It's a high price to pay for a tight end.
Too high for my blood, and I would avoid swerving and taking another tight end later. There's a lot down there you could like way beyond that ADP. That would be much more. Wouldn't surprise me if you outscored him.
We're both fans of adding pieces to your team before you touch a tight end, so that's why he's number 8 on our list. Okay, number 7 is another tight end, and it's pretty much for the same reasons. He's at the opposite end of his career. It's Greg Olsen from the Carolina Panthers, ADP of 59.
Yeah, it's a similar situation. I mean, I think we have to be honest. He has been very, very good. I'm not denying that he won't be close to that, but we've looked at tight ends before. We broke the script down. If you've seen the video, we've talked about the difference between the third tight end and the 10th tight end. There's such a small margin here. Greg Olsen is often has been in the past the third tight end or sometimes second. I think now if you look at all the tight ends around, he's likely the 5th or the 6th, yet you're paying a higher price for him, and he's still a packed tight end. So actually, the odds of some small regression and not matching that ADP are very high. So why take him here? Why not swerve and get another one? And that's as simple.
I mean, the other thing that I'd add to that is he missed virtually all of last year with injury. So and then he came back and he got injured again. So he's not getting any younger. He's a good tight end. We're not doubting that. But for us at this sort of value in the top 60 picks,
we want more for our team.
He's a swerve for us. Okay, number 6, it's a wide receiver for the Super Bowl winning Philadelphia Eagles, Alshon Jeffery.
Yeah, I think he works his way onto this list not because of talent, it's simply because of injury, and very close to the season. There's a very high chance, again, if you watch the videos, there's a risk he could be on the PUP list to start the season. That's 6 games missed straight away. Can you really afford that? And that's the question you have to ask when you come to a picking point in your draft. Yes, he's a big name. The name, I always say this in fantasy, has value. People always trade with a name player. But if he's on a PUP list, the trade value absolutely falls through the floor. It doesn't matter what his name is. No one's going to be able to use it.
And if he does hit PUP, and you've got to factor that risk into the price, you either hold him for 6 weeks and he takes up a roster spot, which is really annoying for anyone who's ever played fantasy before. Or you drop him, and that means you're wasting quite an early pick.
And the big risk then, of course, is if you have got him and he is, as Al says, on the PUP. Then not only have you missed those 6 games, the odds are, I haven't looked at it, so can't say for the camera, but the odds are I think the Philadelphia Eagles have an 8 or 9 bye week. That's another game he's going to miss. So actually, you're missing so much of the main part of the fantasy season that his return value. I mean, you would have been happier taking a player than this guy who's going to cause you a headache.
We're not saying he's not a good player because he's a decent wide receiver.
Very, very good. But just for this year, currently as it stands, I just can't risk it.
Okay, coming in at number 5.
Sounds like a countdown.
Another wide receiver. He missed pretty much all of last year apart from 1 catch. Allen Robinson, ADP of 41, now with the Chicago Bears.
I don't know how he's ended up this high on the list. I mean, you've missed all of last year. You haven't done a lot except for 1 year with Bortles. How has he ended up this high? What is driving up his price? I don't get that price.
Well, I mean, we talked about putting Josh Gordon on the list, but he has got such a high ceiling that he was just edged out by Allen Robinson, who I think he was wide receiver 2 a couple of years back, 220 points. So, there is a high ceiling, but it's a new team. He's coming off a year of injury. Do you trust Mitchell Trubisky? You're paying a high price. ADP 41.
Chemistry is everything here. We don't have any. We don't know how this is going to play out. I could not trust that ADP, and I would not want this guy to be my first wide receiver taken or second.
Which he could well be. ADP
I don't want
41.
that. So I would happily swerve, let other people take that risk. I don't want it on my team.
If he drops a bit lower, then fair enough. But 41.
For me, it's got to drop a whole round lower, and I've got to already have 2 wide receivers before I swerve to him. So league size will determine whether that's even a possibility.
Okay, into the top 4. Number 4, he's going in the top 32. Number 32.
We really are ramping it up. Yep.
It's LeSean McCoy, and this is not because of ability in any way. It's due to injury and, to a greater extent, the extenuating circumstances that surround him.
You can't risk in any draft this kind of player. We saw what happened last year. I mean, you unfortunately had Ezekiel Elliott, and that was tough to balance the books, and that's not your fault. That's the way it fell. You have to take players at points. this is a mess because he could easily be suspended before the season starts. There's every chance that could happen.
Or at any time during the season.
I wouldn't want to risk that kind of high value on a player that's going to have to anchor my team. I want these players to lock in. I want them to be able to be used. I mean, it's one thing to have an injury that no one could see. I can live with that. But a problem like this that you can see maybe coming, do you really want to draft it? It's not my cup of tea.
It's a very risky pick. So, if you're a gambler, I mean...
You're going to get him cheap, and that's great.
Third round, you've got to pay. That's the price you're paying.
And if it was your third, if that was a strategy you were using, I could understand that risk. You're taking potentially locking down 3 great running backs. Okay, I get that. But you may have lost a player as well, so you have to also factor that in. So it is really interesting, but not for me.
So just because of the factored in risk, he's an avoid for us, especially at 32. He should be lower, really. Right, number 3 is another wide receiver. It's Doug Baldwin. Again, nothing against the talent, but he is coming to the season with an injury.
Yeah, we did mention this, and again, it's worth going over because if you're new to our videos, it's well worth looking back on some of our videos because if you go back, you're going to see some very interesting stuff that was predicted long before it's been happening. So, Doug Baldwin, these are all rumours, granted, but they've come from a very good sources. There's a possibility that you've heard about knee drain to Doug Baldwin. It all seems minor, but you have to look between the lines. Kept it very quiet. People are talking about tendonitis here. So there's a possibility this could be like the beginning of arthritis. Now, these kind of things swell up all the time. These kind of knee drains can be a problem. And for a wide receiver, I mean, we don't know how this is going to affect him. They say he's going to be ready week 1. They said Luck could be ready week 1 last year. We all know that.
Very worst, week 2.
And we all know how that plays out. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case here, because I think this is a very tough guy. This is a guy who will play. But I'm worried it's the after-game effects that are going to be the key for me. I don't want a player where I'm not sure if he's going to play from one week to the next. I'm swerving. I'm avoiding him this year. I admire the talent, I admire the toughness, but not this year.
I mean, Charles Clay is someone who's suffered with the same sort of injury, and
that's had a big impact on him.
Yeah, it's affected his whole career. And if it's the same for Baldwin, then picking him at 27
it's madness at this point. Yeah,
it's risky. Take him a bit lower if he goes into the 40s,
50s.
Yeah,
absolutely,
great, absolutely fine.
Well worth a punt.
Right, our top 2 are both players that are going in the top 13 of ADP. So we're talking big guns.
These are going to definitely split. There will be controversy, which is good, but we'll try and justify why.
Okay, at number 2, Julio Jones, and it's not because he is mega consistent. And he's a really great player. He's an elite wide receiver. But last year, in the 13 weeks of the regular fantasy season, he only had 4 weeks where he got 10 points or more. And that was your number 1 pick.
And you need 12.5 points consistently every week to justify that number 1 pick if you work it out over 16 games to just 200 fantasy points.
And he only had 3 touchdowns as well.
So that is a big problem. His touchdowns have always been an issue. Now, we totally get that if you look at his career, obviously the man consistently delivers big numbers. I totally understand that. He could exceed his ADP, but 200 fantasy points, it could well be the ceiling for this guy, and that's it. I don't see an upside. I don't see that big lift where there's no extra 30 or 40 points to help my team out, help my roster out if I've made any mistakes. I don't see that with him. I do see a chance that I actually end up with a lot less. And that's what worries me. Because if he doesn't get 1,400 yards, say he gets 1,200, well, where's that 20 fantasy points coming from? It's probably not coming from touchdowns. He doesn't do any running.
They're just becoming, like all of these players, there is a position where they become valuable. If you can get him at 17, 18, 19...
he's not your first pick.
If you can get an elite running back and Julio Jones, then fine.
All day long, happy days. But unfortunately,
if you're taking Julio at 13 or earlier, then I think you're going to be against the 8 ball all year.
Yeah,
he'll do okay, but like I say, 4 weeks out of 13, that is not good.
Yeah, and if those 4 weeks are the weeks where the rest of your team don't perform, then you're in trouble. So
he had in standard, I think he had about 160 points or something, and one of them was a week of 38, which is great. He probably won that week, but the rest,
you got to worry. You've got to worry about that. So that's why he's on the list, and consider it when you come to that point of drafting if that's the option that you have.
Take him a bit later by all means. Right, number 1, and this is more of Sean's pick.
This is me.
This is ADP 12 currently, and it's Leonard Fournette.
People are going to argue that this is a bad call, right? I get that, right? But it's an opinion. Now, my opinion on this is based on what we've seen at college and the first couple of contact years in the pros. We've got a guy who has serious ankle issues, and he's missing time. These ankle issues are not going away. It's not like they've healed up. It's the same problem. Now, that should scream red flag, because whenever you see this in fantasy, and I've seen this a few times, because obviously now at my advanced age, you have the luxury of time and the luxury of actually observing people play. And when you do observe them play, you see patterns, and these patterns do come up. Now, I'm not saying there's not a value in this guy, because he's a running back, and there is an upside. But can you imagine that if I'm even remotely right, that he misses some quality time this year, 2, 3, 4 games, or worse, that's your first round pick. Now, if you've got a better option before him, get it. As Al says, say he moves up to 16 and he's the best running back available. I'm not arguing you picking him, particularly in redraft. I have no problem with that. You have to get the right point. I think his value is too high. I think it's worrying. And I think you could have a lot of issues, because one thing about him, he's a big man. There's a wear down of him, and the ankles are the first things to go. Let me tell you that. So I really do worry that this is going to be more problematic. And, and I'm not being horrible, because this sounds so callous, so I apologise. But look, coordinators, they know what the weaknesses of players are, and I can guarantee they're going to bring this big man down. They'll use whatever method is necessary. You don't have to do helmet to helmet here. This is just get the guy to the ground as often, gang tackle as much as you can, because the more they can put pressure on him, the better it is. Now, he has an advantage. The one thing he has going for him, their defence is fantastic. And I actually think the game script also goes against him. So if you think about this, if they have more short fields, that's less running yards.
But then he might make up for games.
He might get maybe a couple more touchdowns, but if you work it all out, it may balance out to actually being a loss, because they may not need him as much. And they may not put the wear and tear on him, which you would normally do with a 3-down back, because they know his ankles. So it may be this is where the backup comes in a bit more and late in games, because you don't want to wear your stud out. So you have to factor this all in and then question, is he going to get me the 200 points? In theory, it's easy. It should be yes. But I think you have to be a bit cautious. That's why he's on this list. And if I'm right, we can look back next year and say, wow, that was a really astute move. If I'm wrong, you can definitely rub it in my face and tell me, Sean, you got this really wrong. But it is going to be very tough for me to see him make the full season. I think his history is showing us he's starting to miss games, and I think that's going to get worse.
Okay. So I totally get the injury argument. Obviously, it's a history of it, and it's a pattern now as well. So we'll see how it works out. So do you agree in the list? Do we miss anybody? I'd say Josh Gordon was floating around there, but we just, he has got the ability to really go off. So.
We've made some calculations and guesses, and we understand that there's some risk involved, particularly the Fournette pick is going to rub some people up the wrong way. But you know what? This really important to stick your neck out. That's what we try to do here on the show. And if you think back to the videos we've done, not trying to justify them, but it's a good metrics. Look at the things we've said and look how it's fallen. That is great, because that's what insight is all about. It's about the ability to actually go outside what people are thinking and say, look, this is what I think may well happen. And that's what you're doing. You're making a guess. When you're talking about injuries, no one can foresee them. I'm not expecting him to, get chopped down week 1. But what I am thinking will happen is wear and tear, shorter field positions, and ends up maybe 160, 170. And that actually is a bust, because you want 200 or more. And if he's not giving you that, you could have avoided that player and got someone else.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much if you're still watching. Please leave a like and consider subscribing if you've enjoyed the video, if you like the information. We'd love to hear your busts, because
yes, absolutely.
We will look back on all of them in the comments and everything.
Definitely reward you for your efforts on anything you say that's right. I'd love to hear more.
Okay, thank you.